In a group this size, we don't always get a chance to have one-on-one conversations with each other, so for that reason we kind of call up people to spend some time with us so we can get to know them a little bit better. So for now, I'd like to welcome to the stage Miss Renee Carlin and Miss Pastor Lyn VanOmmeren. And they just got back from a missions trip down in Brazil, so we're going to have them kind of talk a little bit about that. So first of all, Renee, tell me how this idea came into play about you going down there. What called you, like what spoke to your heart?
Well, Damon Krim, our missionary from City of Grace, was here last June, I believe, and showed a video and gave a nice talk about what he's doing in Brazil, and I've prayed about it since that time, and God just laid it in my heart as a place where I need to go.
And what about you, Pastor Lyn?
Well, I've known Damon for some time, and a little bit about what he was doing down there, but not a lot. Really, it was Renee calling me, saying, I want to go there, and I want you to go with me. And my response was, well, that's a great idea, but I'm not going unless the Lord says so, so you got to give me time to think about it and talk with him about it.
Awesome. And what did you guys do when you were down there?
Where do we start? Every day, my common statement about midway through the day was, this is another adventure. This is another adventure. We'd hit the sidewalk at about 11. Brazil isn't an early morning person either. And we'd get home about 1:30 at night. And every day was something new and different. It was, how do you describe it? Renee can be more specific. Those are kids at a project where a pastor in the nearby area has a heart to do something about this generation of young men that generally by 17 are part of the drug industry. And he's pulling these boys in at an earlier age, giving them something to do, staying in touch with them, and we went over to check out what the project was. Damon's involved now next with that project in putting in a medical wing to the buildings that are there. And the kids were great. We had a good time. They speak Portuguese. They can take English and Spanish in school, but a lot of them don't go to school. So it was fun trying to talk to them. And they loved trying to talk English.
Renee, I want to hear from you on that question, but can you describe for us what's the population? She kind of touched on it, but the population that you guys were serving down there.
As far as population, what do you mean?
Well, what types of people were you coming into contact with when you did your work?
We were visiting favelas, which are low-income families, basically the projects of Brazil. They're called favelas. And they're slums, and they are built in concrete, one on top of each other. So like here, the rich and famous live in the mountains. In Brazil, the low income live in the mountains, and they just build these little, I'd call them tin shacks on top of each other. And we were basically serving, Pastor Lyn spoke at 2 church services to the women in these projects. I had an opportunity to talk about the road not to take to a bunch of children, giving my testimony of going down the wrong road for 37 years. And we got to teach English, we got to paint a room, we got to do a lot of things. Basically, Damon, I had never experienced a missionary person before. I'd met missionaries, but never a missionary in his work. and he's basically a pastor. He's a walking pastor down there. And he is well connected, and just everything that we did from morning to night was just pastoring the people.
Awesome. So, so you'd never been on a missions trip before? That was your first one, correct?
Only to Agua Prieta, Mexico.
Okay. And was that, how many missions trips have you been on?
Well, I've had a little more time to go on mission trips. But to this kind of a setting, well, I was in Africa a year and a half ago. I was in Costa Rica, and then previously in England. But most of those, well, African wasn't organized, but a few of those were well organized. I'd like to make a statement that Damons' ministry and what Renee said about a pastor, he's a pastor on the street. God, in his great wisdom, has not given him a building to have to take care of. But he is known by the pauper and the president. Every place we went, in the area that he serves, on the streets, you'd be stopped, and there'd be a 25-minute conversation. His name would be yelled by children, by adults, men and women. He'd stop. Damon's ministry is a beautiful picture of what friendship evangelism really looks like. It was so refreshing to be out of the Western church box. A ministry was 24/7 wherever you were, with whomever you were with. And it was loving people as Jesus loved people, just walking along the streets, making resources available as they were needed, which Damon does a lot of. You saw a picture of a bunch of kids on a, we would call it a soccer field. They don't have fields there. It's a cement area in the city, and Damon was the steerer. That's not really a good English word, but he was the one who created the idea to have a soccer game on a Saturday for all the kids in this one particular favela. The favelas being usually governed by the drug lords. This particular favela was raided by the police less than a year ago because of some murders that took place, and they came in and the drug lords left. Although the drug atmosphere is still there, we would say the bad guys are no longer governing the area. There's now a president. The president was driving out of the favela for the day, saw Damon, stopped his car, and got out of the car, and the result was we wound up being escorted into his office and sat and talked for about 45 minutes. And he was born and raised in that favela, and he's there now, seeing to it changing. But Damon had organized this soccer game because these kids, by and large, don't really have anything to do. They just kind of wander the streets together. And he had us go out and get the resources necessary to make 400 sandwiches, ham and cheese sandwiches, water, because you buy water there, water bottles for every child that came down from the favela to be a part of this, whether they played or not, so that they had something to take home. Trophies, so that the boys' team had a trophy and the girls' team had a trophy. And all of this was organized and directed and resourced by Damon to give these kids something to look forward to, something other than just walking the streets, partying, doing whatever they do. And this is how God is using him in that country, wherever he goes. Pastors from churches call him to come to meetings, to discuss what their next move should be with regards to reaching the community and changing the street life. And it's just amazing to me how God is using him. And we just tagged along as part of the team, which was such a blessing and an honor.
That's awesome. Thank you for that's a great picture. No, that's fine. So what would you say made this trip special or different for you?
I can't pinpoint any one moment, the entire trip did. When I got home, I spent the whole day crying. I was that touched by my experience there. I think one of the highlights was we went out to Bangu, a drug lord favela, and the pastor took us out in a van. And we were at a cross street where there were about 8 guys, right?
2 on each corner.
2 on each corner, and they had radios and machine guns, and the pastor got out, we got out, we followed, we shook hands with them. We stood in a circle and we prayed with them. And then they pulled out their cell phones. And of course, me, I'm getting a little nervous. I'm like, are they calling somebody to come and kill us? What's going on here? And Damon gets in the van and says, I said, why did they pull out their cell phones? Did they not care what was being said? He said, no, they were taking the pastor's phone number. The pastor was offering them a job at the church instead of what they were doing. So they had pulled out their cell phones to take his number. So that was
that's awesome.
That was a pretty exciting experience. I've never been around people with guns like that before.
So do you think you're going to do more missions work?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. Well, tell me, if there's anybody who is interested in getting involved with an international missions trip, can you give us some advice on how to do that, both of you?
Keep the prayers going up and keep your ears open. Because it's God who orchestrates these kinds of opportunities. And when you know that He's orchestrating it, you know that you'll be safe. You know that you'll have the opportunity to pour His life into somebody else's life. And you'll take the opportunity, see it when it comes. I guess you can connect with World Vision or one of the real well-known ministries that send missionaries. But I never have done that, and I've really loved what God has designed for me and expect to have a whole lot more coming up. The City of Grace has some mission trips each year, several. And if you have any interest in that, we have a department and a pastor that's their focus. We do community outreach, and there's one coming up this month that has to do with feeding children. There's always something going on, and you can get, Katie is the pastor of that department. You can get her name and number and contact her. Periodically we print out something in the bulletin that will give that information as well as some of the trips that are coming up.
I just have one last question for you, Renee. Do you think that a good way to determine whether or not you may want to do more missions trips would be to go on a short-term one, like the Agua Prieta ones that we do?
Actually, the Agua Prieta trip, I've been twice now, was a pivotal moment and a good learning ground, because it is an international trip. You're going into Mexico, you're going to an orphanage, you're serving with children, and that's my heart, is children. And it is a good ground to get that exposure. Your desires come from within God to go out and serve and to be a part of a mission trip. And Agua Prieta is definitely the setting stone. That was my first trip, and we're going back in September, and that is open to just the Compass Singles group. So it's September 21st through the 23rd. And if you have any interest or desire in that, please see me.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you so much, ladies, for sharing your experiences with us. Appreciate it.